listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by Aborn and Company. I'm your host, Tim Dooner, here in studio with our own Jill Clifford. Jill, thank you for taking the long walk down the hallway to my studio.
You're welcome. The traffic was crazy.
I imagine. Jill, your voice may sound familiar to our listeners, and it should, because you were our very first guest on Consulting Logistics.
I was.
Well,
Thanks.
Thank you for coming back.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited.
Jill, did you listen to our last episode, The Industry Report with Donald Broughton of Broughton Capital?
I did.
Well, in case our listeners didn't, they can catch that episode at abornandco.com/podcast. Jill, did you know that we're also on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and everywhere podcasts are heard around the world?
I do.
Just search Consulting Logistics on your favorite podcast player.
Definitely do it. You won't regret it. Tim's right. You know, that industry report with Donald Broughton of Broughton Capital is a must listen. Really good information about what's going on in the market.
In the industry report, we covered escalating truckload and intermodal rates and discussed the freight capacity crunch. However, we didn't talk about LTL freight. So, it's a good thing that you're here today. Truckload freight, that's simple enough. One trailer typically filled by one consignee. But what is LTL freight and why are you here? What is LTL freight, just in case people aren't familiar or need to be familiarized?
Sure. So LTL stands for less than truckload. And you're right, full truckload is you've got a full load of a 48 or 53-foot trailer. LTL is very different. They run a pretty large operation of terminals with what you would call pedal drivers. So if you're in Boston, let's say, and you've got 3 to 4 pallets of freight, a trucking company is going to come in with a driver, pick that freight up. In that day, that same carrier is going to kind of stay in the Boston area and he's going to make multiple pickups at different companies until his truck is full. He'll bring that back to his local terminal, which may be in Rhode Island or south of Boston. From there in that terminal, that freight's going to get all stripped off that trailer and it's going to be loaded on outbound line haul schedules. So if it's 4 to 5 pallets to go into California, it's going to leave with a line haul driver who may run that to another terminal in a hub, let's say in Pennsylvania, where it then may be put on the rail and run out to California. So it's a collection of drivers that are local drivers in terminals that then move long haul drivers or intermodal runs, with that final again coming into a local terminal with a local pedal unit driver who's going to make that final delivery.
So this allows shippers to consolidate freight and move goods that if they don't have the volume to fill a full trailer, they can make turns quicker, right? They can make consolidations. They can get the freight flowing.
Correct. And you think about markets in the industry, if you're in consumer brands, if you're in the food industry, if you're in technology, a big part of your transportation spend may very well fall into this less than truckload mode.
Is there an average on that? Is there an average amount of spend people do on LTL? I imagine it would vary by shipper, right?
Oh, it's huge variance by shipper. Really depending on how big of a company you have and how much freight you're moving. Most of the large organizations, companies that are shipping, they're going to have freight that moves in this less than truckload mode. They're going to also have truckload and they're going to have small package.
Well, that sounds like a great option to me, but you probably wouldn't be sitting here if there wasn't a catch. What's going on in the LTL market, Jill?
This is a great time to be talking about this subject. You know, we're hearing all about how bad the market is right now in terms of capacity and why. But as you said, if you're looking at industry reports, it's really speaking to the full truckload market, the intermodal market. Not a lot of information you can find on the less than truckload market and how those carriers are doing in this market. And I'm here to tell you, it's not great news again. This market is experiencing double-digit growth in terms of tonnage and number of shipments per day. The difference between a less than truckload carrier and a truckload carrier is the less than truckload carriers, they do have the ability to scale faster, but they're still struggling. They're really struggling.
So would I use a different carrier for an LTL shipment than I would for a full truckload shipment, or is there some crossover?
You absolutely would. LTL shipments, true less than truckload shipments, you're looking at anything between 1 and 9 pallet positions, 750 cubic feet max. That's a traditional less than truckload shipment. What's happening in the market today, though, I mean, we all know this really good economy, the ELD mandate, the difficulty in finding drivers has caused this really large problem with capacity. And what's happening is traditional truckload shippers are now breaking up those truckload shipments, and they're making what would be one truckload shipment 3 or 4 less than truckload shipments. They're shipping more frequently, and they're putting them into the LTL environment thinking they're going to get capacity, right? So that's helping to alleviate some of the truckload capacity, but now we're seeing this same double-digit growth in tonnage in the LTL carrier environment. The other big difference between truckload and less than truckload is costing. They have a driver, they have terminals they're running. So they have management folks at terminals, they've got dispatchers, operations people, line haul operations, they have dock workers, they have infrastructure, whether they're leasing a building, owning a building. There's that infrastructure there. So good example is right now the market in Dallas is just a mess.
You bring up a great point. As someone who authors all of the articles on abornandco.com/blog, there isn't a lot of information. I'm doing research on LTL shipments. We hear about truckloads all of the time. So my question is, when we hear about truckloads, we hear about hours of service, and we hear about ELDs. It would seem to me then, because LTL shipments have to make all of these turns and all of these stops, ELDs would be a much greater factor in that field than they really have been in other modes of trucking, full truckloads.
I would say sort of, given that the less than truckload carriers' average length of haul is a lot shorter than a full truckload carrier, typically. So the ELD mandate absolutely had some impact on the LTL environment. I'm just not sure if it's as large of an impact as it has on the truckload. You've got a local pedal guy running around, so he's working just a full 8 to 10 hour shift. And then you will have some longer length line haul. And typically what happens in an LTL environment is, say you have a hub in Harrisburg, PA. Your Boston driver is running that line haul, and he's probably running back and forth, and it's a set schedule. So he can live in those ELD mandate rules because of his length of haul. The impact isn't as great as it is in truckload. What you also see in the LTL market is those real long length of hauls, they're utilizing the rail. So they're running intermodal on those longer length of hauls between terminals because it's less costly for them. Now we have a little bit of trouble in the intermodal capacity market too. So if you're shipping LTL today, things are a lot different than they were even 6, 7, 8 months ago. And there's a couple of factors to really look at. One is, we talked about the shipments that were traditionally truckload that are being broken up. 2 is, again, strong economy, low unemployment, the ELD mandate, and how that's made it so difficult to hire drivers. What we're seeing, though, in the LTL market, in the truckload market, there's no capacity, you can't find a truck. You keep searching until you do. In the LTL market, because all carriers are struggling, it used to be you have a service problem with a carrier. In the LTL market, you try to solve the problem, you try to make it work, it doesn't work, you find another carrier to handle the freight at the right price in the right lanes. Today, you got to really work with the current carriers to see if they can provide this service, because service is a problem everywhere.
You mentioned price, and I was going to ask you, is cost a factor? How does LTL pricing work? Is it indexed to the spot rate of truckloads? What goes on there?
Price is absolutely a factor. And if you look at last year versus this year, you're definitely experiencing some LTL increases. Now, whether they're double digit or single digit really depends on where you were last year. Carriers are absolutely taking increases in the LTL market, just like all the other markets. In terms of pricing, how do you price LTL freight? Their costing model is very different. Again, because they have infrastructure, because they have dock workers. They're not just saying, this is the length of haul on this trip. This is what diesel's going to cost me to move from A to B. This is what my trailer tractor cost is. The costing model is very different, and it's layered, because if I'm going for a longer length of haul, I'm hitting a number of terminals. If I'm going for a shorter length length of haul and maybe running through just 2 terminals. All that costing matters. How many people are going to touch this freight from a labor perspective? Who's going to drive it? And what does that mean in costing? So when you look at pricing LTL freight, you're going to have your length of haul, your base rate, your freight classification, and a discount on top of that. And in all that, you then have all kinds of accessorial charges. So you want to be negotiating your fuel surcharge agreement. You want to be negotiating, is there a notify fee? Is this an appointment? Are they going to charge me for an EDI transmission on an invoice? All of that comes into play. It's far more complicated to negotiate less than truckload than it is full truckload.
So each hand that touches the freight adds up. Each fingerprint is another dollar. I wish that worked the same way for my kids, Jill.
It doesn't, Tim. Sorry.
So we talked about cost, and cost has gone up, but beyond cost, the bigger issue that shippers face is capacity or a lack thereof.
Right.
So when we look at the LTL market, filling those trucks is a different process than filling full truckloads. So how is capacity affecting that? Are we seeing the same negative curvature that truckloads are seeing? And it doesn't matter what mode you're going in, the driver shortage is still prevalent.
It is. And here at Aborn and Company, our job is to make sure that we understand how these carriers are operating in all modes. But specific to LTL, we're talking with carriers every day. And right now, I've been here since 1993. And I'll be honest with you, I have never seen a market like this in LTL where it's really impacting service. When the economy gets good, people are charging more, you do see freight rates increase, but we've never seen this capacity affecting service the way it has. And it's really across all of the major LTL carriers. They are all struggling. Some absolutely more than others. And so what we're seeing with the LTL carriers is they're having, again, double-digit growth in tonnage. They're having a huge problem hiring drivers like everybody else is. And so what are they doing about it? We hear over and over and over all these problems. And I don't know how you feel, but as for me, I almost feel like tearing my hair out at times.
So Jill, beyond all that stuff, I was looking at a list of the top 33 LTL shipping problems. And I'll tell you, I had an anxiety attack just staring at this because there's so much to check off here. Poor packaging, difficulty to obtain accurate shipping dimensions, weight, and freight class. Don't I know it? I used to sell out of LTL freight, and getting just dims out of people was like pulling teeth, and they would really seem like you were burdening them to know the unit of measure on the shipment that they were sending out, or if it was on a pallet or not. So shippers, that's a good thing to know how big your freight actually is, and if it's on a pallet. Other ones on your LTL shipping problems at pickup, wrong type of truck, special equipment required. Oh, that was another big one, lift gates, things like that shippers have to tell truckers in advance, or else you're going to have a guy show up at your dock without the appropriate equipment. Freight not matching bill of lading, delivery delay times, damage, missing connections at terminals, delays due to weather, on delivery appointment issues, again, special equipment, lost shipments, freight claims, freight claim resolution, audit bills. There's a lot of stuff here, and that's in a normal market. Does this look a little bit more daunting than it really is, these 33? What would you tell shippers to do no matter what market they are in, to be prepared for when they're going to start shipping LTL?
I would say, number one, today, you really need to change your mindset. It used to be you would just throw freight at a carrier, expect them to figure everything out. You don't like the freight class they're charging you, but the reality is it's probably accurate. So as you speak about packaging, if you're a shipper now, you need to look at that more. You need to really understand how your freight moves in the LTL environment and what it means to the carrier. If you give them a very large box and you're taking up 20% of that space, you're still paying for the 100% of the box space. That's not smart, right? So understand what your packaging needs. A good example of that is, we have a client who ships helmets and they nest them on top of each other. So in these helmets are some mesh. There's a little bit of air, right? So if you had a way where you could attach the mesh in when you received the helmet versus shipping them with the mesh in, you're going to change your freight class. And that's the work that we're doing with clients. And that's what you do need to know. It's almost like we're saying to the industry as shippers, take responsibility for these types of things. Take responsibility to understand how your freight ships, how it dimensionalizes. How long is it taking you to pay your carriers? We have a lot of inside delivery. We have customers who need a lift gate. Some of them do, some of them don't. Let's say some of your customer base is in a mall. What does that mean to a carrier? What's going to be required of that carrier? Have that understanding. If you don't have it, you need to today. You used to be able to push a shipment off to the carrier and then maybe fight with them about a lift gate, even though they performed it. But they're looking for your business. They're looking to keep your business. So they'll say, we'll waive this time for you. They're not doing that anymore. You really need to understand how your freight is operating from pickup through delivery and then work with your carriers on negotiating the right pricing for the service.
You mentioned freight classes. How is freight classified for LTL shipments?
Very simply, the more room you take up on the trailer and the less weight it is, the higher the freight class. If you look at freight class as $1, the higher the class, the higher your cost. The lower the class, the lower your cost. And in terms of shipment type, pillows that are light but airy, they take up some space, are going to cost you more than bricks that are heavy and take up less space. So if you're shipping upholstered furniture versus ball bearings in a container, you're going to get a higher freight class on the furniture than you are on the ball bearings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's dimensional, right?
Correct.
It's funny, though, because if you're a broker listening to this and you hear class, they're thinking of a tariff number, and they have to classify the goods that are going in the shipment. We've identified some of the problems, though, in LTL. Mm-hmm. What are some of the solutions? Because my dad always said, you don't get paid to tell someone there's a problem. You get paid to give them a solution to that problem.
Absolutely, which for us is so exciting. This is the work we do and have done for 30 years. And now people are finally really grasping the idea of it and not just that's something we should be doing. This is something we need to be doing. So again, if you're a shipper today and you're working in this LTL environment, you're having some service problems. You definitely are having problems with transit, with delays in given areas, and depending on who you're using as the LTL carrier, their markets are all different. What's good for ABF isn't for XPO. What's a great lane for FedEx Freight is not for UPS Freight. It's all driven by the customers they're doing business with and the lanes they're moving in. Our job here at Aborn is to make sure we understand how those carriers are operating and where they're operating. We'll have a national long-haul carrier whose service in a lane right now is 42% on time. That is just horrible. Yeah. So our job is to understand where everybody's service is in that lane and what would be an alternative.
What is an average right now in this tough market?
It's awful, really. I mean, you should be expecting very high 90s and on-time performance. The average is probably high 80s, low 90s.
Is it a bigger problem in the LTL market than the full truckload market, or is it similar?
I think you experience more transit issues in less than truckload because you just have more shipments. So if you have a $10 million freight spend and $5 million of it is in truckload and the other $5 million of it is in LTL, there are a whole lot more LTL shipments than there are truckload shipments in that spend, right? If you're moving a skid at a time or 1 to 5 skids at a time versus one full truckload of 26 skids at a time, your freight costs are a lot less and there's a lot more shipments. So in terms of number of shipments, you're having more problems, no question.
This sounds like a lot to keep track of, and it sounds like a lot of data points and a lot of moving parts. How can shippers go about collecting all this data and using it to get an aerial view of all of this and manage their freight?
So here's what you want to know. You really, again, want to be schooled on the carriers because they all don't look the same. And when we look at market conditions today in less than truckload, we see carriers performing far better than others and for reasons. And the things you want to know about. Problem statement is for carriers. We have this strong economy, low unemployment rate, ELD mandate, difficulty hiring drivers, and now we're having this double-digit growth in volume. What are you doing about it, LTL carrier? And what they're doing about it is they're opening new terminals or they're expanding terminals. They're hiring new drivers. We just had one national long-haul carrier tell us they've hired 300 drivers already this year, and they need to hire 300 more. It's a lot of drivers. And over across all the LTL carriers, they're also all bringing in technology. Technology to better route for drivers, which is time, right? Can we shave time off of this truck? Better technology for visibility, which is time. How many heads do we need to track and trace freight? better technology for invoicing. So they're all looking to improve technology. I mean, millions and millions of dollars they're pouring in. Now that's the carrier side. On the shipper side, it's super, super important that you're making these investments as well. Probably not in infrastructure, but when you start talking about technology, when you have the ability to bring visibility to an order that then becomes a shipment and you can follow through to delivery, you are in such a better place than you are if you don't. That visibility is key because it allows you in this really hard market to make better decisions as to how to move your freight.
Yeah, in a depressed freight market, the attitude towards shipping was get it there as quick as you can for as cheap as you can. People barely knowing anything about their freight, what goes into their docks. All of that is changing though, because there's a new school of thought and it's things like shipper of choice, which we spoke to Chris Peckham about a few weeks ago. Because right now, the rates are bad across the board. There's not much you can do about that on the surface. But there is a ton you can do about that by taking better control of your supply chain.
Right.
One of those ways, like you mentioned, time creates capacity. Better moves create capacity and create savings through those and through process efficiencies. What kind of tool would you recommend on the tech side or any side for shippers to start using if they haven't already yet? Because we know their competitors are adopting these systems.
When it comes just to freight, I would say if you're in a warehouse, whether it's your own or an outside warehouse, you want a good warehouse management system that talks to a transportation management system, a TMS. If you don't have a TMS today, you are flying blind, or as our founder likes to say, you've tied your hands behind your back.
Jill, my hands are tied behind my back. Mm-hmm. What is a TMS?
Transportation management system allows you to take your orders, whether they're in an ERP or they go from an ERP to a WMS, a warehouse management system, brings them into this tool, this transportation management system. And from there, you have the ability via API technology and EDI. API is going to be the way to go. Not all carriers are there, but they will be. Take all of your pricing, all of your routing instructions, all of your transits with carriers, and that all gets loaded into this TMS. So you then make an order, it becomes a shipment, and then you have all visibility to where that shipment is. Has it been tendered to the carrier? Yes. Is it in transit? Has an appointment been set? Has it delivered? Did it deliver clear? Was sort and seg responsible here? Did we have a lumper fee? Did detention hold us up? Those are now all data points so that when that invoice comes in via right now invoicing in the carrier land is only EDI, but they will be moving to API. You pull in that invoice, you then have already told the entire story of what went on in that shipment so you can then technically audit that freight bill and get your carriers paid. Super important. We hear so many times companies saying, oh yeah, we gather our shipment data. We have shipment data to show you and you can run some forecasting studies for us so you can look at where our heavy lanes are. It's never captured in a meaningful way.
So if I'm the transportation manager for a company without a TMS and my CFO yells at me, why are the freight costs so high and why is everything taking so long to get there? Probably not going to have an answer. But are you saying if you have a TMS, you would have that data in those analytics that you could show that CFO right away. So A, he doesn't blame you for the issue, and he can better understand where these costs are derived from and then strategize based on that.
You got it. That transportation manager can actually go get some industry information and really good industry information as what's going on in the market. But without good data that you can pull from a TMS, he's not getting what his market is doing in this market, right? A lot of the work we're doing here right now is we're showing our clients on an industry level, here's what's happened to the market, whether it be outsourced truckload negotiated contract, outsourced truckload spot, less than truckload negotiated pricing, small package international. We know what the industry reports are telling us. We then can use that client's shipment data analytics and show them, here's how you're doing in this market. Here's your year over year, your month over month, based on your seasonality. Here's how you're living in this market. I hate to brag, I sound like a bragger now, but what we've been able to do with our clients with this data analytics via TMS, with our knowledge of the industry, anyone can go out and get some industry stats to show you what's going on in the market. With the data for our specific clients, we have the ability to show them what they're doing in this market. So truckload spot market's up 20%, but guess what? Your spot market is only up 12%. So having the data analytics to really show the client, because they're all in that position. All of these procurement folks, global supply chain, they're now having to report to senior level as to what's going on in the market, more so than ever. We have clients who never from a senior level looked at transportation market conditions and what is going on. They are now. They absolutely are now.
It's got to be a stressful time in shipping departments. I can imagine that the defense of a lot of transportation managers is probably, well, it's not my fault. It's the market conditions right now. But I think we have to do better, right? As transportation managers, we have to do better because there are ways around that. And it's not going to take the people above you long to realize that there are other ways to stay competitive and to retain that competitive advantage. And right now, that is you starting to take shipping more seriously.
Which is exactly why I said the solution is mindset. We were on a call last week with a client and he, again, is being challenged by his senior management team. What are we doing in this market? What is going on? And he's saying, what can I do about it? What can I do? And this was a position in a person who used to be, well, that's up to the carrier and the carrier screwed it up and the carrier screwed it up. No, you've got to own this now. This whole shipper choice buzzword, I know I've told you this before, but I haven't shared it on this forum, it just blows my mind. It's this new catchphrase and we're all talking about it. That's the work we've been doing for 30 years. And so when we get someone on the phone and they say, I want to build carrier relationships, I want to build carrier partnerships, we are so super excited about that because right now in this market, you won't survive if you don't. And I think what's happened, technology is such a great thing and so crucial and so needed, but you absolutely have to use it in the right way. So if you're in transportation or you're in supply chain and you brought in technology to rate shop, to search for the lowest cost carrier every day, and to not make relationships and partnerships with your carriers, you are struggling more than anyone else in this market. You just are.
It's funny you mention that about shipper of choice too, because when you look at our shipper of choice article, you listen to the podcast with Chris Peckham, it's all very common sense kind of things, very sort of first world country things that you would provide to your carrier. And on episode 5, we had a trucker on, and he's like, look, just leave the bathroom unlocked. Sadly, there's shippers that are not doing that. We gotta strive to be better. Otherwise, carriers they don't have to dance with you. There's enough partners on the floor right now.
And I'll be honest with you, Tim, over my 25 plus years here, I spent quite a bit of time in clients' dispatch offices where the folks who are checking those carriers in to get their freight picked up. And it's surprising the way these drivers can be treated. It really is. Again, that's the work we've been doing for so long because we'll sit with that team and say, you know what? When John from ABF Trucking comes in to pick up, be kind, be respectful, look him in the eye. These are human beings. And I know you're in a rush and you're looking to get freight out and step outside and no, we don't have a bathroom here. That doesn't work. That driver's going to go back to his terminal operations and say, I'm not going there anymore. And before, what they may have done is increased your rates because of it. Look, we're going to go over there. They're going to give our drivers a bad time. That's going to show itself in the pricing we give this shipper. Now what they're doing is, we're not going to handle your freight. We have an LTL carrier that we were just with today, very large regional carrier, profitable. They've reduced their revenue by 10%, but their volume is still up 12%. And what are they saying? We're walking away from the business that's not working for us, not just from a cost perspective, from a time perspective. How long are you holding up my drivers? How are you treating them? How are you paying us? Are we arguing on all these freight bills? Are you paying us in 60 days? They're not going to live in those terms anymore. So I think that's for me and for everyone here, because we've lived in this world for so long. That's really the big change we're seeing, is that people, shippers, are trying to do the right thing versus this is a carrier problem. There are so many times you hear this is a carrier problem. Well, it actually really is your problem no matter where the problem started. Because they're delivering to your customer. They're the last person to face your customer to deliver your product to.
That is such a good point. I mean, this is a front-facing party, but it's a third party. So it behooves you to create a partnership and treat them like you would a consultant or other business partner or emissary who is going to your customers.
100% true.
Jill, you're starting to convince me. So crystallize this LTL trouble for me. Give me 3 small baby steps I can take to get on the right track.
Number one would be knowing yourself. Know your operations, know your docks, and know how that is working for your carriers. Number two would be technology. Technology allows you to bring all the right visibility for you and for your carrier partners. Three would be carrier relationships. Start treating your carriers and their truckers like they are an extension of you.
To read our accompanying article on LTL troubles, visit abornandco.com/blog. That's abornandco.com/blog. You can find this episode and all of our previous episodes at abornandco.com/podcast, or simply search Consulting Logistics on your favorite podcast player of choice. Jill, thank you for joining us today and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having me.
Tough times finding space on a truck these days, but if shippers follow your suggestions, they're already ahead of the traffic.
They really are. It will get better.
Listeners, are your supply chain costs going up? Contact a trusted advisor at Aborn & Company today for a complimentary consultation and learn how we have successfully negotiated over $5 billion in client freight expenses. Jill, how can they get in touch with you directly?
Directly, you can email me at jclifford, CLIFFORD, at abornandco.com. And just as a side, I was formerly Jill Carney, still the same person, now Jill Clifford.
Yeah, I was going to say, some listeners may have been confused. Who is Jill Clifford?
I'd love to tell you I ran off and eloped, but I did not. I've actually just taken back my maiden name after years and years of being divorced.
You're taking it back.
I am. You know, it's funny. My kids, their only worry was that the dog, Sophie, our dog, could still be a Carney, that they didn't really want her to be a Clifford.
Oh.
So all is well in the house.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to learn how to spell an entire new last name.
For a dog, especially. Yeah.
If you guys have any questions, comments, requests, and guest bookings, email me at tdooner@abornandco.com. That's TDOONER@abornandco.com. For Jill Clifford, I'm Tim Dooner, saying take care and happy shipping.